So I'm Reverend Christine McFarland, Unity of Springfield. And today we are on our quest journey. We've been following the quest series since the beginning of our year, and we are on the chapter titled Humility. So we began 2020 following the book that was written by two Unity ministers, Richard and Mary Alice Jafala. The quest, a journey, is a spiritual rediscovery. That's what we've been doing. And the lessons found in the book have given us the opportunity to dive deeper into our own personal understandings, especially the past few weeks. And soon we're going to be nearing completion of this book and this series. And we're on chapter 41, which speaks to humility. And I love how the Jafalas start this week's chapter in the book. They tell us this week, there is only one presence and one power in this universe, and I'm not it. Herein lies the secret to humility. When I was growing up, we had a pool in our backyard, and my dad managed to connect the stereo to an outside speaker, which meant if my friends were over, we were all listening to the radio station my parents chose to listen to, and they preferred country music. And I lived in Milwaukee and Wisconsin at the time, so it was FM 106. You still remember these things, doesn't matter how old you are, right? And when I started to formulate ideas in my mind of what I was going to speak about this morning, I could not get one particular song out of my head. I'm going to try not to sing it. But if you recognize the song, you can join in because I'm sure it may come to some of you. It was written in 1974 by Mac Davis. And the verse goes like this. Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way. I can't wait to look in the mirror because I get better looking each day. To know me is to love me. I must be a heck of a man. Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble, but I'm doing the best that I can. How many of you were singing that? Yeah. And the song makes me chuckle because it's obvious the singer in the prime of his life was having a hard time being humble. We've all experienced that before. And the biggest challenge we have if living an authentic life to being humble is ourselves. We need to get out of the way so God can do its work through us. I want to share a story with you. There once was a stone cutter who lived alone, and though he acquired a great skill, he was very poor. He lived in a tiny bamboo hut and his clothing was tattered. One day, as the stone cutter was working with hammer and chisel upon a huge stone, he heard the crowd gathering along the streets, and by the shouts, he could tell that the king was coming to visit his humble village. And joining the procession, the stone cutter gazed in awe as the king, dressed in marvelous silk, was greeted by his subjects. Oh, how I wish I had the power and glory of the king, he thought. He has soldiers at his command. There is no one more powerful than our king. His cry was heard in the heavens, and immediately the humble stone cutter was transformed into a powerful king. He found himself riding on great horses, waving at the crowds of people who flocked to see him. And this is power, he thought. As summer progressed, however, the new king watched the effects of the heat upon his people. Men and animals became weary and plants withered under the powerful rays of the sun. As he looked at the sky, the new king realized the sun was far more powerful than any earthly ruler. Oh, how I wish I were as powerful as the sun, he thought. I wish I were the sun. Immediately his wish was granted. How the stonecutter relished the new role as the sun. He glorified in the power that he felt as he surveyed the kingdoms below him. As he sent bright rays to the earth, he watched kings and princes hide under their parasols. and he watched as powerful warriors became weak under his gaze. Even the crops in the field were under his command. Then one day, a tiny cloud moved over the land, shielding the earth from the sun's bright rays. And seeing that there was something more powerful, he thought, I want very much to be a cloud. Again, his wish was granted. Now he blocked the sun's rays and felt important. He gathered all of his strength, becoming a gigantic cloud, and he began to pour down rain on the earth. Rivers formed where there previously was none, and waters flooded the streets of the cities and the farmland. Everything, trees, animal, people, seemed to be awed by his power. Everything except a huge rock that remained untouched. Again, he had discovered something more powerful. There is nothing, he thought, as powerful as a rock. How I wish I were a huge stone. And his wish was granted. As a stone, he remained motionless and powerful, unmoved by either sun or rain or anything nature could bring. And the stonecutter felt exempt from all the forces that shaped the life and existence of those around him. Then one day a man approached him carrying a bag, and when he stopped, he pulled out a chisel and a hammer and began to chip away at the rock. Realizing that the man with the tools was more powerful than any rock, he cried out, "Oh, I want to be a stonecutter." And once again, his wish was granted, and he lived in a bamboo hut and made a living with his hammer and chisel and was content. You know what's coming next, right? How do we break this down? Metaphysically, if we break this story down, the stonecutter was already following the desires of his heart. He was living authentically, and life was good. But then his ego kicked in, and he wanted to be powerful. He had a humbling experience in realizing his power wasn't as being a king, as the sun, as the cloud, or even as the rock. It was in being his authentic self. And when he realized he had all the tools he needed to be powerful, he was humbled when he realized his very own gifts. He understood how blessed he was at peace, and we too have all the tools we need to be at peace. The more humble we become, the more potential for power we actually have. We were told as children to appreciate things and to be grateful, to be humble in a sense. And we have also been told the world belongs to those who are rich and strong and powerful. Have you ever worked with someone whose complete desire was to make it to the executive management team of a company or an organization? Sometimes they want it so bad they basically run everyone over to get their way. The Jafalas tell us this week that if we have to run anyone over to get what we want, it's really not ours. That kind of thing is of ego. When we are using other people to satisfy our own needs, when we push our own agendas, we are operating out of ego. Wayne Dyer explains ego in this way. I am what I have. I am what I do. I am what other people think of me. I am separate from everybody else. I am separate from what's missing in my life, and I am separate from God. And all of these things born of ego are just not true. They are false beliefs. We are not what we have. We all come into this world and we all leave here with the same things. We are not what we do. We are not what other people think of us. We are not separate from everybody else. We are not separate from what's missing in our lives, and we are not separate from God. Ego broken down, EGO, is an attempt to edge God out. The Jafalas tell us when this happens that we need to get ourselves so far out of the way that the activity of spirit can work unimpeded in our lives. That's hard for us to hear sometimes. We need to get out of the way so spirit can work. You see, many of us have our own ideas of how we want to do things or of how we want things done. We think and believe many times that we know all the answers, we know everything. So much so we resist the presence of God that is attempting to work through us. And when we operate out of ego, we can't hear that voice that is attempting to speak to us. Admitting that we don't know everything is the key to humility. Being authentic is the key to humility. But this is where we get tripped up. We many times believe that if we are being authentic, that it makes us vulnerable. If we are operating from a place of authenticity, our walls come down. We are exposed in a sense that makes us uncomfortable. But it is in that vulnerability when we are being authentic, that's where our humility lies. The Bible talks about humility 73 times. And several references to humility are paradoxical in nature. So I thought I'd ask Siri to define paradox for us this morning. A seemingly absurd or self-contradictory statement that when investigated or explained may prove to be well-founded or true. Here are two such references. Matthew 23:12. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. And Luke 9:48. He who is the least among you all is the one who is great. And here's a story that lends itself to these truths. Well, at Unity Village, I met an amazing woman, a great friend who I don't get to see much anymore. She has lived her whole life with cerebral palsy. She is an advocate for herself and others who have special needs. She opened my eyes to many things I take for granted. And having a disability, she many times did not feel seen or heard. People would not speak directly to her. In her interactions, people would attempt to speak to whomever she was with. And she prepared me for such encounters by patiently telling me how I could support her and how I could respond. Honestly, she has the patience of a saint. I don't know how patient I would be knowing every day I had to get up and go into the world to educate people who really didn't want to be educated or schooled on physically challenged biases. I remember being at a restaurant with her when a server was obviously uncomfortable with taking her order. He kept looking to me to interpret. And I redirected him, saying, "You'll have to ask her what she wants for her sides. I don't know." The server walked away and my friend would share her frustration with me, and then we would laugh because what are you supposed to do? And people only know what they know. If they have never had interactions or experiences with anyone who is physically challenged, they don't always know how to act or respond. In my initial interactions with my friend, I learned I really didn't know anything about being physically challenged. I learned early on of the accessibility problems, in addition to many of the humiliating experiences she encountered on a daily basis. Many times people treated my friend poorly. She could have resented everyone. She had reason to. She could have been flippant when she was asked stupid questions and she wasn't. She could have been bitter and yelled at people, but she didn't. Well, at least not when they were around. She learned discipline early on. She knew when to speak up and she knew when to keep quiet. There are societal biases against disabled people. When people were made aware of these biases, when she would speak up, she never knew what kind of reaction she would get. And she, to this day, patiently educates and advocates for those who are physically challenged, and her enthusiasm is contagious. If we are not willing to be moved or changed or both, if we are not open to learning, we cannot be humble. Once, a long time ago, there was a wise Zen master, and people from near and far would seek his counsel for his wisdom. Many would come and ask him to teach them, enlighten them in the way of the Zen, and he seldom turned anyone away. One day, an important man, a man used to command and obedience, came to visit the master. I have come today to ask you to teach me about Zen. Open my mind to enlightenment. The tone of the important man's voice was one used to getting his way. The Zen master smiled and said that they should discuss the matter over a cup of tea. And when the tea was served, the master was poured his visitor a cup. He poured, and the tea rose to the rim and began to spill over onto the table and finally onto the robes of the wealthy man. Finally, the visitor shouted, "Enough! You are spilling tea all over. Can't you see the cup is full?" The master stopped pouring and smiled at his guest. "You are like this teacup, so full that nothing more can be added. Come back with me. Come back to me when the cup is empty. Come back to me with an empty mind." We have a lesson in this as well. We are experiencing COVID-19 right now. Our numbers are nearing hospitalization levels that cannot be supported by hospital staff, should we need hospital care in any way. This is not how we want it to be. And there is a lot of pain associated with this pandemic on many levels. Knowing how things are supposed to be causes us pain. What if it's possible that this experience is supposed to be entirely different than our own ideas of how it's supposed to be? We essentially have been asked to humble ourselves. The whole message to the human race seems to be, what is most important to you? We have been asked to go home, sit and think about it like we're 5-year-olds who are asked to go sit in a corner when we've done something wrong. If our cups are overflowing and we are not open to learning something new, we have edged God out. If we choose to respond from our egos, we are edging God out. If we are choosing to isolate, indulge in harmful or addictive behaviors, we are edging God out. If we are choosing our own will over anyone else's will, we are edging God out. We have choices in this experience. We can choose to surrender to the unknown. We can allow God to do its work or not. Humility is an internal process. We don't have all the answers. We don't know everything. I've been binge watching a show on Netflix, Sheetzel. Has anybody been watching Sheetzel? Well, you may not be because it's in Hebrew. And so there's lines on the bottom and you have to read the whole thing, but I've watched the whole series. And it's about a Jewish Orthodox family, and the patriarch of the family is Shalom, and he's a rabbi, who tells one of his family members this: You think you have it all figured out, and then you discover that you don't understand a thing. And isn't that true? Stella Terrell Mann in How to Use the Power of Your Word says, the trouble is that we know too much that isn't so. We are too sophisticated. We lack humility. Elizabeth Sand Turner in Your Hope of Glory says, unless we are humble, reverent toward God, and willing to listen and obey, we cannot receive the gifts God has for us. In summary, we have a few things to think about this week. True humility is complete authenticity. The more humble you become, the more potential for power you actually have. Humility doesn't use anyone or anything, it allows. It means we step back and wait to see what happens next. When we allow, we get out of the way and allow God to do its work through us. Humility teaches us that life is for learning, and that no matter how much we know, there is always room for more. We can't broaden our horizons if we think we know everything already. Next week, we're going to be talking about trusting and serving God. Until then, we have some things to think about. So let's prepare for our offertory. We have this beautiful slide that Chris Farishan created. So if you're finding balance with help from Unity of Springfield, please consider donating, and she tells us the ways we can do that. So let's just bless our gifts. So we bless these gifts. We bless the givers. We bless the receivers, knowing divine love works in and through us. Divine love multiplies everything we have. We are grateful for this knowing and this understanding, grateful for this opportunity to give and to serve, and so it is. Amen. A special thanks this week to everyone who participated in our game night. It was a lot of fun. It was good to see all of you. A special shout out to Sandy for all the work that she did in helping to prepare it. It was a good time had by all, and it was a good time for us all to share and be together and share our own personal stories. It was good to get to know everyone a little better. So let's end with our prayer for protection. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Thank you, God.